the great fundamental issue now before our people can be stated briefly. It is, are the American people fit to govern themselves, to rule themselves, to control themselves? I believe they are. My opponents do not.
I believe in the American Constitution. I favor the American system of individual enterprise. I am in favor of protection. I believe in the permanent court and further limitation of armament. I am opposed to aggressive war.
In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes.
Whether we shape the future in the image of our hopes is ours is to determine by our actions and our choices. If we succeed, generations to come will say of us now living that we mastered our moment.
Americanism, not globalism, will be our credo.
Bringing Heartland America into the heart of the swamp. This is The Right Take.
Hello, everybody. How's it going? Welcome to another episode of The Right Take. I'm Eric Lendrum, here with my co-host Jacob Grandstaff. And no long intro for this one, guys. We are just going to dive right into this. We have a very special surprise for you. So, of course, as we said before, we are trying to get more guests here on The Right Take in the new year, 2022. We had a handful last year. Very good guests, very high-quality guests. Each interview was great. You guys should go back and check them all out. But we had, of course, one person for our very first guest, all the way back in episode number 25 in June of 2021. A little over 9 months ago. And now, after that time, almost a year now, that special guest has returned for a comeback appearance here on The Right Take. That is none other than the man, the legend himself, Tom Pappert. Tom, welcome back to The Right Take.
You're too kind. 9 months. That's actually depressing, Eric. I feel like I could have had a child in that time, but here we are. A lot of fun things have happened. Our country is immeasurably worse, but at least we're still here and having fun. So it's great to be here. Thanks for having me, Eric. Thanks for having me, Jacob.
Of course. Glad to have you on here. It's Clown World. We're all just going to honk our way through it.
That's our only way forward. I honestly believe that so long as we manage to have fun through all of this, we can be the guys who come out on top, because nuclear Armageddon, the guy in the bunker telling the jokes is going to be the only one keeping people sane. And if that guy plays his cards right, he could easily be the president of Earth when we all surface again and stop being mole people. That is, of course, if Stacey Abrams hasn't already claimed the title.
Yeah. Oh, man. But yeah, it's great to have you back here, dude. It's great to be able to have these jokes and laugh at the world as it continues to implode around us. And you, of course, are doing the best work possible in covering the latest crazy events of the day. You are a man of many talents. Your works have been written in many publications across the internet. You have made headlines. You have changed the outcomes of elections at the federal level. Of course, as we said before, your reporting did ultimately change the outcome of a U.S. Senate race in 2020. And your work has not slowed down at the slightest. It is continuing. So you have a brand new venture. Tom, Mr. Pappert, if I may, would you like to tell our audience about your new outlet, your brand new publication?
You're just trying to make me sound really, really old, aren't you? Well, Valiant News is our new website. You can find us at valiantnews.com. And the vision is to kind of I think that we're in the middle of a realigning right now in America. And I think that and maybe I'm totally wrong, we're going to find out at Valiant News, but I think that people are tired of everything being sensationalized when everything is already sensational. You really don't need to try to take it to the next level when Joe Biden just yesterday basically, I mean, he said we were going to war with Russia, then the White House came and corrected him a couple minutes later. When things that crazy are already happening, I think people are tired of being coerced into feeling certain ways about an article. So our goal is to put out truth, to put out easy to understand things that will leave you informed, and hopefully to keep changing these major races and to have a lot of fun while doing it. And we've got a great team. Of course, I'm of course there, but we also have Jack Hadfield, a phenomenal talent from the United Kingdom. We have Gabe Keane. You may remember him as Meme Lord for Hire on Facebook, and Andrew White, our up-and-coming writer, who is just phenomenal. He's actually the biggest writer on the website right now because he's been brave enough to dive into Hunter Biden's laptop.
Oh, that is a gold mine that just keeps giving. I still the stories that break out of that thing. Again, it was almost 2 years ago now that the story was first reported by the New York Post, and it's one thing, all right, to see him recording himself on his laptop webcam of all things, with prostitutes and doing drugs and boasting about his foreign business connections. But then it's like, oh, surely it can't get worse, right? And it gets worse. It gets worse. Oh, so
just today we had, so I think it was in the New York Post, they were reporting, and as we're recording, I know the audience may have seen this by now, but Hunter Biden was apparently helping to get funding for the Ukrainian biolabs that aren't supposed to exist. You can't make this stuff up.
This stuff is so bizarre that if you explain it to the average person, they just don't believe you. This is the difficulty we face. Even conservatives, you explain this stuff to conservatives, and it's like, no, that can't be true. That's too far-fetched.
It sounds like something out of a movie or a GTA game. Yeah.
That's why. So that's what I'm starting to lose my love of the New York Post, but I used to just laud them endlessly. And then with the Hunter Biden thing, they had a photo of him with a crack pipe dangling out of his mouth while he appeared to be asleep. I didn't know any of that was possible. How do you sleep while on crack, let alone with a crack pipe in your mouth? But that was not the lead. The lead was Ukraine, Bobulinski, financial matters, and it's like that is not visceral. People don't understand that. So the New York Post, I'm a fan of what they used to really represent, which is a highbrow, lowbrow balancing act. So our headline up on Valiant News as we record this is just like my mom. Hunter Biden watched, I'm going to actually butcher our headline for the sake of your audience's innocence here. Hunter Biden watched mom-themed adult videos shortly after referring to his comparing his mom to his former lover. That's the type of stuff I think is visceral to America. Like, wait a minute, we all heard about Bush's daughters like having a beer or whatever. Hunter is actually watching stepmom videos.
I mean, yeah, remember when Sarah Palin's daughter got pregnant at 16? That just like blew up the internet when that happened. But like,
it was the end of the world.
No one bats an eye. Oh, he watched mom videos. He watched mom porn videos. Oh, okay, whatever. He's not president. That's the line now. Oh, he's not president. We voted for Joe. We didn't vote for Hunter. That's exactly. The way liberals are coping.
Remember, Barron is autistic. Barron is a retard. Trump hates Barron. Barron wants to kill himself. Everything that we saw about that poor child. I'm surprised we didn't have his Minecraft server doxed.
He's secretly, remember, they can't dox him because he's secretly a world-class hacker, don't you know? As the president said, he knows computers. He knows computers so well. Like, he really is, that kid is definitely a prodigy if ever there was
Very one. Good with the technical.
But absolutely, if anything remotely like this came up with Don Jr. You know the media would be all over it obsessively day
well, they
and
call
night.
him a cokehead. They call him a cokehead because he's a New Yorker and he likes to go out and when he was younger he would go to nightclubs. Okay, that sounds like everybody living in New York. Yeah. Meanwhile, we have Hunter with the crack pipe in his mouth, firing it up. Like, it's a little bit different.
I see that picture of Hunter sleeping in the crack pipe, and I remember someone commenting, "Oh, he's not asleep; he's ascending to a higher dimension." He's living his best life, man. I mean, the thing, realistically, though, let's be honest, he is living his best life right now. He has all this dirt on the internet, and he gets away with it because his daddy is president of the United States.
It's a book
deal. And yeah, he gets a book deal. He gets to sell his crappy art that even Jackson Pollock would look at. Like, damn, dude, what is this? Like, it's just like, I hate the media so much, because Jacob and I, we talked about this before, where when you first saw the Hunter Biden story broke with the New York Post back in October of 2020, you initially looked at it and said, oh, that's game over. He's going to lose. This is going to be his Hillary email server story. Then a few days later, when Twitter and Facebook literally banned you from posting the URL link, you can't even share the story. Jacob, you then looked at it and said, oh, never mind, it's game over the other direction. This means Biden's going to win.
Yeah, if social media, and this is the thing, it's not just the media not covering the story, and this is what the New York Post actually brought out a few days ago. They pointed out that it is the discretion of the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, not to run a story if they don't want to run a story. It is not the discretion of social media companies to suppress stories. So this is where the real crime is, because this is illegal. This is an in-kind contribution to the Democratic Party for Twitter and Facebook, and I think even YouTube stepped in and to suppress this. So if they had not suppressed that, Joe Biden would have lost in a landslide. Those independent voters, this is why you look at the polls now, Joe Biden is sitting at like 41, 42% at best. Yep. Fox News has him at 45, but that's how Fox News polls are. They always lean Democrat. But those independents who are leaning heavily Republican, they would have all voted for Donald Trump like they did in 2016. There's no way he would have won if social media had not suppressed this story.
I think that's right. And I think the bigger takeaway, because they're not going to stop, and I think that this has pushed a lot of people to get on Gab and get on Spreely and get on Telegram and even Getter, which is good. But they're never, these social media companies, they have more money than most African nations. They have deep relationships with repressive governments like China. They have no qualms with, they don't care about us. We are dirt beneath their feet. So the solution, the takeaway for me is the New York Post and Rudy Giuliani and whoever else was involved in that laptop back in 2020 made a fatal error by not doing what happened in 2016 with WikiLeaks. WikiLeaks, so long as you could go to wikileaks.org, you could find all of those emails. And then, I mean, you and me, us three, we were, I assume you were, Jacob. I don't think we met back then. But Eric, you and I were helping just like on Facebook, random guys saying, oh, OMG, did you see this? And that is what was ripped away by giving it as an exclusive to the New York Post. On paper, it makes sense. It's one of the most read papers in America. They've been around. They're arguably the oldest newspaper in the country. That's what they advertise themselves as.
Founded by Alexander Hamilton.
Right. But the fact is, they are one outlet, and then other outlets have to plagiarize them if they want to put that information out or aggregate it or do other things. If they had created the WikiLeaks style of culture where it was what Andrew Breitbart told us about. Everybody was a journalist. Everybody was just as good as the New York Times when the WikiLeaks dropped. In fact, we were all better because the New York Times was refusing to cover it. And I think that would have changed things enormously. And I got to say, hats off to the guys over at Marco Polo USA, where MarcoPoloUSA.org, I believe, is the website. You can actually now view everything that's not like going to get them a knock from the FBI from the Hunter Biden laptop online, and you can be that citizen reporter. It just took 2 years to get us here.
That really is true, and it's interesting, of course, like you mentioned, Andrew Breitbart. Just earlier in this month, we had, unfortunately, the 10th anniversary of his tragic and far too early passing, and I did get a chance to watch the Breitbart documentary they did about him shortly after he died called Hating Breitbart. And man, that guy he did pioneer a lot of what we are able to do, what you guys and other independent journalists, guerrilla journalists, as I believe I said in the previous episode, what you guys like to do. That guy was a firebrand. And if it were not for him, we would not have this kind of citizen journalism we have now.
That's exactly right. And yet you see the decision makers, they don't understand that. The old fogies, they still don't understand that. And I like Rudy Giuliani. He's America's mayor. I don't blame him. But all of the people who were advising Trump in the campaign, because I think that's how the laptop came to be, they don't understand. Give it to Jacob, give it to Eric, give it to me, give it to some guy off the street, and they will start salivating just reading those emails. They will go, oh my God, I'm gonna win a Pulitzer, but we're not, because we don't have the big publication behind us. But regardless, it can get out. That's the ethos. Because Breitbart, if you remember, Breitbart died so long ago, but he used to hold up his phone and say, everybody's a journalist now, everybody can do this. And I remember thinking at the time, yeah, but it's gonna be like 2 pixels. Well, now here we are 10 years later, we have movie quality cameras with us at all times. We should all be CNN at this point.
We'll never forget that the legendary based trucker in New Jersey, Ed Durr, who beat the state Senate president, he had one campaign ad and he literally recorded it on his iPhone and spent $153 on his campaign, and he still won. So yes, we really can use our phones to win these days, like Breitbart predicted.
I think he spent more on Dunkin' Donuts than he did on the actual campaign ad.
What a legend. I remember seeing the meme shortly after he won. Someone posted a fake template, like Wikipedia template, of the 2024 presidential election with Ed Durr as the president, with Donald Trump as his running mate, and he beats Biden with like 400 electoral votes. God.
And $400.
God, we can only hope. But yeah, so as we suggested earlier, of course, and as we've already described, there is a lot of new stuff going on with Hunter Biden that you guys are covering that some other outlets will not cover, or as you said, they will bury the lead under, foreign business deals. And that obviously is important right now, going on with, especially with all the goings on in Ukraine right now. I think there's something going on over with Ukraine right now that's might be hurting their interests a little bit, because now the energy company can't function right now because it was bombarded. But yeah, so
the Russians are outside of it right now. Sorry, go ahead.
No, it's all right. So are there any other juicy stories you would like to tell us about at Valiant News, or anything else you want to cover here?
Well, so we've got all kinds of stuff on the horizon, but right now a very enlightening piece of weekend reading, if you want to spend some time, is a timeline of how all of Hunter Biden's relatives and close contacts responded via text after he was accused of behaving in a sexually inappropriate manner around a minor underage relative. Now, multiple outlets, Candace Owens, Lauren Boebert, and I think even BizPac Review have all named this person as Natalie Biden. That would be Hunter Biden's niece, the daughter of Haley Biden. Well, in 2019, for an unspecified period of time, 2018-19, Hunter was banned from seeing this young lady, alleged to have behaved sexually and inappropriately, and the word molest came up once around her. And the entire Biden family got in on it. You had Joe Biden's acknowledgement via his brother, Jim Biden, who, of course, showed up in the Ukraine business dealings of Hunter. You had Ashley Biden, who, of course, aside from the diary, Ashley is a registered social worker who may well be a mandatory reporter, meaning it's possible she broke the law by not calling the police when her brother confided that his niece thinks he molests her. So it's a fascinating timeline that just tells you exactly how messed up our first family is. And I think it's a pretty good indication that Biden isn't in charge of his own family, let alone the United States.
Country.
He had Joe doing it for him. Jim do it for him.
My goodness. Yeah, because Haley Biden, correct me, you said Haley Biden that's Hunter's niece, right?
Sorry, it's also confusing. So Natalie is the niece who he is alleged to. Yes. Now Haley,
she's the daughter of Haley, and Haley was Beau's widow, right?
Yes. So Hunter, for those who don't remember, was in a hot and heavy relationship with his brother's widow that started almost the second they buried him. And it did not go well. In the text messages, it is alleged that they were both using drugs together as part of their mourning process. And then Haley was getting sober. There's allegations that Joe Biden was actually forcing Haley to take random drug tests, just pee in a bottle type of drug test, because Joe Biden had no confidence in his own daughter-in-law following the death of his son. Horrifying family. How did this happen to America?
And especially when you consider, again, that's his dead brother's widow and now her daughter. And especially consider, how many times does Joe love to talk about his dead son? He's always talking about my dead son, my dead son. You know, at the State of the Union address, when Lauren Boebert heckled him, the mainstream media spun it as, Lauren Boebert heckles Biden while he talks about his dead son. Like, he loves to use his dead son as a human
Remember the debate? Trump goes, well, what was your son doing with his energy business in Ukraine? And Biden goes, how dare you talk about Bo?
Wait, he spilled the beans on that one.
Trump fired right back. He said, I don't know Bo. I'm talking about Hunter. Like, he showed no mercy, which is great. That's how you deal with that situation. But he talks about Bo so much because by talking about Bo, it's a way to deflect from the rest of his family. Like, Bo's the only good member of his family that he can hold up.
Yes.
He's kind of like JFK, or he was kind of like JFK's older brother, Joe Kennedy Jr., who was supposed to be the head of the family. He was supposed to be president, but then he was killed in action in World War II. You know, Bo was, I think he was Attorney General of Delaware, I believe. He had a political future ahead of him. And
I've actually heard that as far as Democrats go, like, Bo was not the worst guy to have as your Attorney General. Granted, it's Delaware, but I've read the entire Ashley Biden diary. I'm not going to say I've read all of Hunter's emails because they're never ending, it seems, but I've read probably a good third of them. And that entire family, and this could just be what happens after somebody dies, but so in Ashley Biden's diary, she did this chart of people and what they remind her of. And Bo reminds her of, like, being a little girl and before she did drugs and before she became a slut and all this
stuff. Like innocence, reminds her of innocence.
Yes. And Hunter talks about Bo as if he's the man that Hunter could never be. Like, they all seem to venerate this guy. I actually have a hunch maybe he was the good Biden.
The one.
And unfortunately God took him. Maybe it's good. Maybe God took him before he could see what would happen to his family in a few years. My God.
Yeah, that is really depressing, because when you consider, I mean, the dynamics here obviously is that, I'm sure Hunter, in his moments of sobriety, he looks at the legacy of his older brother Bo, who was the clean one. He had his life on track. He had a future ahead of him. It's probably not hard to imagine that he was the favorite son of their father. And when he died, obviously that's devastating. But then Hunter's sitting here thinking, like, why does Bo get all the praise? Why was Bo the favorite of my father? And that may or may not have played a role in his life taking the downward spiral that it was. It's kind of the same thing with in the royal family. You have Prince Harry, obviously. With obviously it doesn't help who he's married to, but he looks at his older brother William, who is next in line for the throne after their father, who is next in line after the Queen, and knowing that Prince Harry that ginger loser will never be king of the United Kingdom. And again, with his wife whispering sweet nothings in his ear, that may or may not have played a role in his decision to basically exile himself from the family. So those kind of family dynamics are really sad. It's really tragic.
That's fascinating. I wonder if Hunter thought he was alien, if he was doing that, if he was just getting out of it by doing, because there's a lot of guilt too. Because clearly the way it works in these families, the elite, it's always the son who has to make all the money while dad's in DC, and you can say that's corrupt, or maybe it's not, but it's corrupt in my opinion. But so it seems like when Bo died, Hunter's like, what do you mean I gotta quit smoking crack and get a job? What's charisma?
Okay, maybe daddy can help me get a job. But I do want to kind of shift toward that dynamic, that aspect of it, because a lot of Democrats will say, okay, look, we didn't vote for Hunter. He's got problems. We admit he's a crackhead. Okay, yeah, he's slept around with whores and stuff like that. But we voted for Joe. And so his son has no bearing on him. So how do we bring this? How do we connect this and tie this into Joe to convince people? Okay, yeah, this stuff about the incest claims, all of the crack smoking, all that's bad. But this actually does have implications not only for national security, but also for just general corruption. It is tied into Joe. So how do we make that argument to people?
So there's two things. One, the guys on our side who say that you shouldn't talk about this because it's the children. I mean, he's 51 years old. He's not a child. But beyond that, I mean, it's biblical. You will know the tree by its fruit. All of the fruit of Joe Biden is rotten, disgusting, and probably has herpes, or if not something else. I mean, it's
one
horrifying.
good apple from Joe Biden is no longer with us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I mean, I certainly, it seems everything I've heard about Bo, he was a good, upstanding man. But who's to say where he'd be if he were here 8 years later? I mean, we really don't know. It's horrifying to think, considering what the other two kids look like and what everybody else in that family looks like. Like, even Jimmy Biden, Joe's brother, seems like he's got a screw or two loose if you read these text messages where he says that he's taking Hunter's side and the whole rest of the family is, in his words, F-nuts. Insanity. So that's how I think you can talk to people on our side, conservatives, who maybe they just think this is all too raunchy and in poor taste. You judge the tree by its fruit. As far as the left, I think that is where you put a picture of Hunter smoking crack, and then you say, this guy's in Ukraine. This guy, it's like that Jaden X guy, the guy who was urging Ashley Babbitt to go through the Capitol. Did you know he's in Ukraine now too? It just seems like everybody they do goes to Ukraine. So Hunter Biden, crackhead, degenerate, sex fiend. We're gonna write an article. I keep joking about it because it's so funny. Hunter was in a crack hotel doing large amounts of drugs, and he had a woman with him. He tells the woman to go out and get Brillo pads, which is what you use as a filter for your crack pipe. And she's all confused because she just thinks she doesn't know what a Brillo pad is. She thinks you have to just buy a new crack pipe. And so she goes on like an 18-hour crack-fueled journey, texting Hunter, I don't know where to go. Okay, I got it, baby. Are you still there? Can I come back? Hunter winds up having his car stolen by this woman, his truck, and then there are text messages to the person that I assume is the pimp. And he's saying, you better give me my effing car back, SOB, or else do you know who I am? I'm going to bring the might of Biden down on you. He's like threatening to get his daddy involved. Like, this is hilarious.
This new Seth Rogen movie sounds amazing. I gotta go see it.
It's like Hangover 7. And this guy has an energy company in Ukraine, by the way, and he does business, in his words, with the spy chief of China. Mm-hmm. And Biden says he's the smartest man he's ever met. So how do we square that peg, guys?
It's too, you're right. That's like you said earlier. It's too good to be true. It's too wild to be true that any of this could be remotely true, but I believe it at this point. I don't know. I would believe anything I heard about Hunt to this point. If I heard he was into bestiality, like that weird guy that the Biden administration just hired to handle nuclear energy, I would believe it at this point. Like, there is just so much wrong here. I think the important thing...
I'll say a lot of incest, a lot of drug use. They call it party and play, P&P. I did not see any bestiality, thank God.
Okay, thank God. That's something at least. But I think it's important to, like, in order to try to, again, to sell this as important when it comes to, the family. Oh, it's family, leave it alone. To sell it to normies or even to people on the left is to emphasize how much Biden lies about his family constantly. I mean, there's the one thing, okay, yeah, he uses Bo's death as a shield, but let's not forget how often he lies about his family. Dating back to his history, of course, we know, of course, his original wife and I believe one of his daughters both died in a car crash many years ago when Hunter and Bo were still kids. And he frames this, oh, this is a really tragic time in my life. And then I met Jill, and she brightened up my life. And he made it sound like, a Cinderella story. Except it turns out, and this was also reported by the mainstream media right before the election, when he met Jill, she was already married to a friend of his, and who actually introduced them. And then they eventually started having an affair. And while she was married, shortly after his original wife died, and then it came to a head when he was driving her car to go to the store, so he had to go get something, and was involved in an accident. And the insurance company called up her husband and it was like, excuse me, sir, your wife's car has been involved in an accident. And he was like, oh my God, is my wife okay? Is my wife okay? What happened? And the insurance company or whoever was like, no, your wife wasn't driving, sir. He's like, wait, who was driving my wife's car? Senator Biden, sir. And of course, obviously that was the end of that. But and his story, it's completely forgotten by the mainstream media. They completely erased it and made it just seem like, oh, he met this single young blonde woman who's a doctor, by the way. Did we mention that she's a doctor? And the Ben Shapiro routine, she's a doctor, folks.
Well, and he also lies about his involvement in civil rights all the time. Like he claimed that he was imprisoned in South Africa when he was just briefly detained. He claimed he marched with civil rights protesters, all kind of stuff, just makes stuff up on the fly.
Well, I mean, he's the reason why we've never had a black female Supreme Court justice, which I guess is why his handlers are telling him to appoint one now. So we're going to have Judge Ketanji, I give light sentences to pedophiles, Jackson Brown or Brown Jackson, whatever it is. No, I mean, the guy is a serial liar. The other part of this is he's 79 years old. It's not like he's Obama or even Bush 43, where Obama's kids, I mean, we saw, I think it was Malia twerking at Lollapalooza, then getting carried out on a stretcher because she partied too much. She just partied too much. It happens when you're young. Well, this isn't that. I mean, I can kind of understand that. I think when you're the president's daughter, you should maybe hold yourself to a higher standard, even if he's been out of office for a couple months. But, and it was just a couple months, I think. But Hunter is 52 or 53 years old. Ashley is in her 40s. Joe Biden is 79. This has been, they have been in and out of more rehabs than any of us could probably imagine even exist in this country. Ashley Biden details her tips through 3 of them in the diary that was published a couple years ago. At some point, the dad has to say, holy crap, I screwed up here, and acknowledge that, or it doesn't. I don't know. I have no respect for him otherwise. I think pointing out the business that these guys go on, combined with the degenerate activities, combined with Joe Biden saying he's the smartest man he's ever seen, I think that is powerful, and I think that breaks through to some people. Now, I will add that here's a conspiracy. So Hunter was 3 when his mom died, and of course there's Joe keeps lying and saying it was a drunk driving incident.
That's right.
There was no alcohol involved in that wreck at all whatsoever. And some evil conspiracy people say maybe it was Joe's first wife who was drinking and he got it backwards. I don't say that, but he lies about that, and so Bo was a little bit older though. Bo would have been like, I think 6 or 7 when she died, whereas Hunter was 3. So Bo, maybe he wasn't so screwed up because he had less time with Dr. Jill and more with his biological mom.
Could be.
Oh, interesting idea.
You mentioned how Biden simply will not admit that he made a mistake in raising his kids, and this is a pattern with Joe, with the Afghanistan debacle. At no point during that debacle did he ever admit that he made any mistakes. At no point did he ever you don't even have to apologize or admit you made a mistake. You can just say, okay, stop. Stop this offensive. Let's back up. Let's recalibrate our plans and go around this way. He never does that. People talk about Trump refusing to ever apologize. Trump refuses to apologize because he understands it's a sign of weakness in business relations.
Yes.
However, Trump many times recalibrated his strategy. North Korea is a perfect example. He went from tweeting about Fire and Fury and Rocket Man, how he was going to blow Rocket Man up. My button is bigger than your button. He went from that dynamic
that could just be his strategy work. But look at COVID. In the beginning, he didn't believe COVID was real, which was awesome. And then he believed it was real, which sucked. Now he believes it's real, but it's like, maybe it's not as big of a deal as everybody's saying. Let's get back to work, which is great. Mm-hmm. So yeah, but he's never apologized for putting the country in a 2-week lockdown that lasted for 2.5 years. And he never will, because that's who he is. But Biden, he doesn't have to apologize or even change course because people just show up behind him and correct him. Like, it happened twice in the week we're recording right now. The first time he said that if Putin used chemical weapons in Ukraine, then we would respond in kind. And everybody's like, I thought we destroyed our chemical weapons. I thought we invaded Iraq because of that.
And not to mention, the chemical weapons are literally illegal by international law. So he's admitting, if they committed war crime, we'll respond by committing our own war crimes.
And then the next morning, the White House comes out and they say, no. He was just saying that it will be a very serious response. Okay, that's all he meant. And then that same afternoon, after the White House had already corrected him, he goes up to the 82nd Airborne and he's like, the Ukrainian children are so attractive. You're going to see it when you're there.
And young women standing in front of tanks.
Everybody assumes that means, okay, I guess we are going to war with Russia.
Yeah. And then he was speaking to the 82nd Airborne at the time, I believe, right?
Yes, he was talking to soldiers who go fight wars.
In Poland. In Poland, nonetheless.
Yes, in Poland. They're next door. And then, within 30 seconds, the White House was there. Mr. Biden has been very clear. There is no plan to send troops to Ukraine. It's like, what are you talking about? I just heard him say it. He has not been clear. So he can just say whatever he wants, and he just has these little, gremlins who follow him around, cleaning up his mess and lying for him.
It really is a combination of the two worst things, I think, with him, which is, of course, how senile it is, his senility, that, he says these things and you can tell he's not really aware of what he's saying. The moment you reference when he said, we respond in kind, the reporter asks the question. She starts off like, what would you do, if Putin uses chemical weapons? There's a moment in the video where he pauses and then just closes his eyes for like a couple of long seconds, then slowly opens them and then says that, like Windows XP shut down, restart, reboot. But then you combine that, the senility, with there's no sense of accountability with this guy. No one has ever criticized him or held his feet to the fire unless it's the presidential primaries. And, he runs away with that. And this
No, even then, do you remember everybody was being like, everybody was calling out how big of a fascist Obama was, and how could Joe Biden work for a man who caged children at the border?
That's right.
And then after that first debate, the talking points memo went out, and literally, I'm pretty sure I saw it on Media Matters. Yeah, well, don't criticize Obama. And you cannot use Obama's record to attack Biden. And the message was clear. Biden's record is off limits, because his only record was when he was attached to Obama.
Exactly.
Our only hope really to avoid war is that foreign leaders don't take Joe Biden seriously. And I think they really don't, because you think about the oil situation. After we decided to stop buying Russian oil, he went to Venezuela to try to buy oil from them. But we don't even recognize their president as their president.
Maduro. Yeah.
So they probably took that with a grain of salt. Then we go to Saudi Arabia.
Now,
they don't even pick up the phone.
Yeah, we're back in Yemen. We're going full genocide in Yemen.
Yeah.
Go Biden.
They don't even pick up the phone. Then he goes to Iran. Iran responds by firing 12 missiles at our base in Iraq. So
I would just love to see a screenshot of the text messages between Biden and Saudi Arabia and the UAE, and it just says left on red. Please respond. Please respond. Left on red. 3:06 a.m.
Well, so Saudi Arabia is mad about three things. They're mad about the fact that we withdrew from Afghanistan in such a horrifying way. They're upset that Biden is trying to do a nuclear deal with their natural adversary Iran, and they're mad that we're not backing their genocide, their alleged genocide of the Yemeni people. Which I don't believe is actually happening, but that's what Biden was saying was happening just a couple months ago. And then this week, Antony Blinken, the Secretary of State, put out the tweet after they wouldn't pick up the phone saying, "We stand by Saudi Arabia, our historic ally, in their ongoing fight against the insurgents in Yemen."
Unbelievable.
I mean, even way back on the campaign trail, remember when that Washington Post journalist got killed, that we were all supposed to care, or disappeared, I should say, and we were all supposed to care, like, oh, this is the worst thing ever, this is literally Hitler. And of course, Biden, among other Democrats on the campaign trail, was like, we'll hold Saudi Arabia accountable. And of course, 2 years later, he's like, please, I need your help, please. And the prince there, that Chad prince they have, is like, screw yourself, go play in your nursery with your pudding at 3 a.m.
Did y'all hear about what happened? I think it was this morning. Biden was giving a speech in Poland. As soon as he began to speak, like literally the moment he began to speak, Russia rained down dozens of rockets on Lviv, which is the further westernmost city in Ukraine, which is like 400 kilometers away from where he was speaking. Like,
so
at the moment he began to
embarrassing
speak,
to be an American. How did we get here? This must be what they felt like during Carter.
It's got to be. This is worse. This is worse than Carter.
It wasn't until like the end of Carter's presidency that the whole Iran thing happened. It took him 4 years. Like the energy crisis that all kind of started in like '79. All this with Biden. Afghanistan started, 8 months into his presidency? And now we have the inflation, we have the supply chain crisis, gas prices, and now, basically we're on the verge of World War III here, whether we get involved or not. And it's not even...
And we're gonna like it used to always be a joke. So not that long ago, Buchanan ran the numbers in 2009. It seemed recent in 2015. And he said that even if China and Russia and North Korea all ganged up on America at once, it wouldn't be fun. It would be difficult, but we'd wind up winning in the end. I no longer believe that's true. What have we seen since Joe took office? We're kicking people out of the military because they don't want to get the vaccine for whatever reason. We're up. Increasing our transgender representation in the top brass above all else.
Increasing the women representation, just promoting women like crazy.
Women who keep failing the tests, but their superiors are like, no, just keep retaking it. We'll pass you eventually.
Or we just change the test because it's too hard. The average recruit no longer is a corn-fed Southern boy. It's someone who looks like not like a Redditor. I was going to say like me, but at this point, I look better than these people. They're all, it's terrible. And meanwhile, you see our recruiting ads, and it's like, my lesbian parents raised me well. But when I was done with my sorority, I thought, I need a way to give back to the country that allowed my gay moms to get married.
It wasn't even that.
I joined the Marines.
She didn't even say, in that ad you're talking about, she didn't even say give back to the country. She doesn't mention America or patriotism once. She says, I want to define myself. I wanted to be able to express myself. Yeah, the military is a great place to do that.
That's what they're going to say about it. That's just it. Who do they think is going to join the military? The military, for people, I don't know, maybe it's different for the Zoomers, but I was around and you guys were around when George W. Bush was like the most unpopular. We all thought it was, oh God, he's such an unpopular president because everybody didn't like the war. Well, compared to Biden and what they tried to do with Trump, it's nothing. But I don't think anybody my age or a little bit younger will ever join, who is a liberal, will ever join the military unless it's to pay for their trans surgery or something, because everybody remembers, we were like 5 steps from spitting on the troops Vietnam style in 2006, 2005.
Yeah, because the military, because the way I was raised, I'm sure we all feel this way, that we are raised to respect the military as an institution. But when you take one look at what's happening here with the systematic indoctrination from the top down, Lloyd Austin and Mark Milley talking about critical race theory, white rage, and all that crap, and obviously they're now forcing it and every branch of the military, on officers and everyone on down, between that and the vaccine mandates and now trans acceptance and like pregnancy flight suits or something like that. It's just everything.
And the pushback. Remember when the military went to war with Tucker Carlson for pointing out the maternity flight suits? Now, I'm not a biologist, but it seems
neither is
to
the
me
Supreme Court nominee.
it seems to me that that a woman who is pregnant flying, like pulling 5Gs, I don't know what that does to the baby, and I question that a maternity flight suit can save the poor child. I also don't know, like, why do we are we in such a shortage of pilots that we have to put pregnant women in the air? No, not just women.
I think we've reached the point in our civilization where we've basically reached the apex where we have complete uncontested power. And we've got a new generation of people who can't imagine the homeland ever being threatened. So they've reached the point to where it's like, yeah, the military is just like a social institution. Let's have social experiments. Let's use it as a vehicle for equality and equity and whatever new buzzword they come up with. They don't actually see it as a necessary institution to potentially defend their homeland because they don't believe they're citizens of the world. Like the people who are running our military, they're global citizens. They don't see the United States as their native soil. Because, after all, their ancestors are from other places in the world. This is the problem. Like, you're not going to have a cohesive military if the people in the military look at the majority ethnicity as their enemies.
Well, and they don't understand their one job, which is really to protect. We are very fortunate here in America. We have thousands of miles of ocean on either side of us. We have an unstable country to our south and a cuckolded country to our north. So we're in a very fortunate position.
Yes.
But the military is supposed to be looking out for our economic best interests, and that is not transgender maternity flight suits and the thoroughly modern General Milley who wants to learn about white rage. None of that looks out for our economic interests, and that's the American empire take. I think in 15 years we're going to be in an entire less than that at this point, maybe by the time Trump gets back. And if you look at what's happening, it seems to me that China is laughing all the way to the bank. They're loving this happening with Russia, probably because Russia is clinging to them, getting as close to them as they possibly can, using their banking, using their electricity, selling them coal, selling them seafood. They're selling Chinese seafood. I didn't know that was possible. I just read that yesterday, though, and it seems to be true. And increasing all of this. Meanwhile, we talked about Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is ditching the petrodollar when dealing with China. They're talking about just selling China oil in exchange for yuan. India is refusing to stop doing business with Russia. They say that it would cause a famine because they buy cooking oil and fertilizer from Russia. So they're going to buy those in rupees and sell stuff to Russia in exchange for rubles. We are witnessing the very rapid loss of American economic prosperity and dominance in this planet. And it's all because this geriatric lunatic can't get his head on straight. And the military is going to be totally unequipped to do anything to stop it. That's I think that'll be a wake-up call, hopefully.
Well, I saw memes posted by pro-Russian posters on Twitter. They were saying, yes, the whole world is sanctioning Russia, and it had a map of the United States and Canada, Western Europe, and Australia and Japan, and that's it. And then the rest of this, like, these countries are sanctioning Russia. The rest of the world is not sanctioning Russia.
Exactly. When you look at the handful of countries, like major countries that have refused to explicitly condemn what's going on in Ukraine right now, obviously China, of course, and we've seen this. China has already agreed to boost Russian imports of wheat and other goods and service and products that they make, to offset these Western sanctions. But then you look at other countries, like you mentioned, India. Strangely enough, India and Pakistan together both are either taking Russia's side or are remaining neutral on this, which is funny considering those two hate each other's guts. Israel has not yet condemned what's going on in Ukraine. Saudi Arabia obviously has not.
Abramovich, but he fled the UK, wound up in Spain for a little bit, took his yacht to Tel Aviv, Israel, and then flew his private jet to Turkey and then to Russia. That was the only way he could get home.
Brazil as well. Like Jair Bolsonaro, he met with Putin shortly before Putin launched the invasion. So I'm sure Bolsonaro, like Xi Jinping, knew about the invasion ahead of time, and he was perfectly okay with it. Because this is the thing: these countries see the basically the international cancel culture of NATO, and they don't want to be on the wrong side of that. So they see the only way out as diminishing NATO's power.
Bolsonaro isn't a marabou. He's obsessed with American cowboy movies and Donald Trump and the art of the deal. Like, that's why Trump liked him so much, because he's like, he worships America. He thinks we're what America was in the 80s.
Exactly.
He thinks it's the coolest thing ever. And so if he's like, yes, I will go. I can't do a Brazilian accent. They're very nasally. If I will go with it, I will go with Russia. I think that that really says something about the decline of the American world order. Somebody asked me, Jack, it was asked me last night, what's going to happen with the multipolar order? Is it going to work where, that's what Putin says he wants. He wants to have multiple poles of influence, one in Russia, one in Beijing, one in America, I guess, but he wants to have one of those spheres of influence too. And I don't think it's going to be multiple poles. I think it's going to be everybody versus America for the next 15 years, and it's going to suck to be in America's side.
Exactly. We talked in a previous episode, of course, that the New York Times put out an editorial. I know it's the New York Times, but it was actually not as cringe as you would think it would be, on the 50th anniversary of Nixon's trip to China when he met with Chairman Mao and opened relations with China. And the New York Times saying, we are now at the dawn of the China-Russia alliance that Nixon feared. And I don't think it's obviously that simple, but that is kind of what we're looking at right now, is you got Russia and China, they're both agreeing to work with each other. We know, of course, that Putin and Xi had a private summit meeting where they agreed that, okay, Putin's like, we're getting ready to invade Ukraine, but we'll wait until your Olympics are done because we don't want to steal your spotlight. So then they do that. That was confirmed. It's been reported. And obviously, China is taking a close look at this. They're monitoring the situation very closely, and they're gauging the reaction of the West, i.e. the United States, so that they can decide when they're going to move in on that little neighbor of theirs just off the coast called Taiwan. And they've got North Korea with them. And, of course, we know Russia has their handful of allies. They got Belarus helping them out with what's going on in Ukraine. You've got these strategic alliances that, as you said, they are united with one common cause right now. They don't like the United States. And again, to think about where we were just 3 years ago, Trump was meeting with Kim Jong-un. Trump was, serving chocolate cake to Xi Jinping as he's telling him, oh, by the way, I just bombed Syria. Enjoy the cake. Like, we go from that to whatever is going on now. You're right. It is so depressing. It's embarrassing. And we should remember,
it's the weakest we've been since the Civil War, I would say.
Absolutely. And that's not an exaggeration. We know Biden loves to talk about the Civil War when it comes to January 6th, but this is actually, unironically, a Civil War 2022 moment. It's just... I
just mean the military is disorganized. Nobody has any interest. Morale has got to be depleted. The economy is being propped up by the Federal Reserve, just printing money machine go burr. The culture is just in a malaise worse than Jimmy Carter from all the older guys I talked to. So I mean, it has to be like the Civil War, just in terms, and the economy is just nobody can get a job or wants a job.
Exactly. Where hiring signs are literally everywhere, and they haven't been taken down for weeks, and there's a reason for that. Jacob and I were just in California a little while ago, and those gas prices, it's real. They're not memes. There are places with gas over $6 a gallon. It's insane.
It's $4 in Kansas. The last time I saw it over $3 was when Bush was in office.
Oh my God.
It's been that long.
I'm gonna take this moment to say, Car Cucks BTFO'd, Metro Gang rise up. That is all, folks. But yeah.
We'll see what happens when China sets off the EMP and my stepdad's ancient truck still moves, and you're walking through the tunnels of you're in Fallout 3 going through the tunnels underneath DC trying to get to the White House.
Knowing our luck in this timeline, though, what we all want is Fallout New Vegas, but instead we get Fallout 76. That's gonna be our luck. Obviously, it's not going to be impressive. That's for you, Sean, and my friend. You know who you are. A huge Fallout fan who knows Fallout 76 is one of the worst things to have ever happened to the video game industry. But yeah, it's depressing. Like you said, it's embarrassing to be an American. It's depressing to be an American right now. And above all else, it should be enraging. We should never forget, we need to be angry at what they are doing to this country, what Biden is doing to this country, so that his brother and his crackhead son and a lot of them can get rich off of our misery. We should not forget that. We should not let that go. And I know people say, like, wait for the midterms, wait for the midterms, they're going to get crushed. And I have no doubt they're going to get crushed in the midterms, but it needs to be so much more than that. There needs to be more action taken against Biden. I would love to see the Republicans impeach him on day one with a new majority. I don't think it'll happen, but we'll see. Who knows?
Well, and we need to use this time to make sure. So, and this is another, we get all these wonderful little purity tests when we're not even purity type guys. We don't care about that. Even in politics, I'll be friends with anybody as long as we're moving in generally the same direction. I'm like the communists that way. We're all fellow travelers nowadays because we've all been banned. We're all evil, so we might as well just be friends. Now there are some who just
breaking news. Tom Pappert, I'm like a communist. That's gonna be our clip. Thank you, Tom. Thank you. That's gonna be our clip.
But no, it's true. And now there's some people who won't be my friend, like Ben Shapiro, so fine, but whatever. Other than that, but we don't believe in purity tests here on our side of the aisle. But we keep getting them all the time because Biden just keeps handing them to us. Do you support going to war for Ukraine? Well, then you're not really. I mean, you're not really my friend then. Do you support forcing January 6ers to eat prison what do they call it? Prison bread, where they put it all in a blender and then bake it, and then that's what you get when you're in solitary? Then we're not friends. We can't be friends.
Exactly.
But fortunately, most people disagree with those things.
That is the thing too. I've mentioned before, I posted on Gab about this, that war really is nothing but a tool for both parties. Because remember, 20 years ago, it was the Bush era neocons who said, if you don't support bombing Iraq and Afghanistan right now, then you must hate the troops. And now here we are 20 years later, and the left is saying all over Twitter, if you don't support going to war in Ukraine, you must love Putin and you must be a communist. They're going after Tucker, they're going after all these people, JD Vance, all these people who are against war, which
it's a lot of the right too. You gotta admit, it's a lot of our guys.
That is the crazy thing, and that's, I think, a perfect segue to what we want to talk about next, is what is going on with the right. Obviously, the left is going all in on this Hollywood social media approach, the sharing those Ukrainian flag filters everywhere. I see people walking around with Ukrainian flag pins here in the DC area. It's not a joke. There was this one guy. I haven't told the story.
Really?
I haven't told the story in the podcast yet. A few weeks ago, I was buying groceries and I was walking back to my place and I saw this guy, this younger looking yuppie dude. He couldn't be older than like his early 30s or so, but he was already balding. He was wearing those.
DC tends to do that to a lot of people. I don't know if you've noticed or not, but a lot of people in DC bald young.
Very early. Yeah, they bring it on themselves. But this guy was wearing like a tan overcoat, not like a trench coat, but like those overcoats you wear with a suit. And he had pinned to it a Ukraine flag pin, but what it was, I could tell immediately what it was just by looking at it, because he was coming this way, I was going this way. All these, Jacob, you know what I'm talking about. These meet and greet events where, you go and, like to, nurse one glass of champagne or one glass of wine and meet people and shake hands, exchange business cards, all that stuff. And you get a name tag, put in the little like laminated thing, laminated square that you pin to your jacket, pin your shirt, whatever. I could tell it was one of those name tag things that he had taken the name tag out, because it's usually a white piece of paper with blank white on the other side. He turned it around to the blank side, and with two markers, a blue marker and a yellow marker, like a Sharpie, had drawn the blue and yellow lines. They were uneven. It wasn't a straight line. The fade.
I would have taken a picture. I would have been like, dude, I love your lapel. Can we take a picture? Come here, bro. I got to get a selfie with you.
I didn't think fast enough, but yeah, that's absolutely what it was. And he walked by. He was strutting, like showing it off, and I'm just like, this was shortly after the invasion. This was like about a week after the invasion. So I'm just like,
sure.
That is DC for you.
They need to just come up with a lanyard with a tag that says virtuous. That would just save them so much trouble, so much.
I support the current thing.
Yes,
no, exactly. Like the NBC meme.
this is one of those things like face masks where we get a little bit of that out in flyover country, but not to that degree. I have not seen anybody wearing Ukraine lapels or colors. I was walking to a store, 'cause we can't actually do that sometimes when you're downtown. And so I was walking to a store and I'm like, I hear a protest, and immediately I go into PTSD because I live at the corner of Rioting Street and Black Lives Matter Avenue, and it was miserable for all of 2020. But so I'm like, oh my God, I'm on the street. I don't have my car. Where am I going to go? So I'm like, I know the guy who owns this business, and I go in and I'm shooting the breeze with him. And I'm like, you know, there's some kind of protest outside? And he's like, no, there's a protest? I didn't hear about that. And it was just some college kids holding Ukraine flags. That's as bad as it's gotten here. They were nowhere nearly as bad as Black Lives Matter. It actually made me respect them, but they're just like college kids. Like, they don't know what the hell they're protesting.
It's the trend. That's the thing. And again, Joe Rogan talked about this on his show a while ago. He mentioned, that just a few years ago, the mainstream media, Vox and a lot of other, left-wing / mainstream outlets, they're the same thing, was talking about Ukraine and covering Zelensky and saying, the headlines he read, welcome to Ukraine, the most corrupt country in Europe. Zelensky solidifies ties with the far right and neo-Nazis. Exactly, the neo-Nazis. And now suddenly, as Rogan said, we're supposed to forget about that. The neo-Nazis aren't real. There are no neo-Nazis in Ukraine. Even though this is where, some of the, quote-unquote conspiracies come in. They're like, yes, there are neo-Nazis in Ukraine. No, there's not enough of them to justify invading the country, and wholesale slaughtering people. But it's these weird little, this disinformation, the fog of war.
There's also, like, they act like that's Putin's only reason. Like, Putin, of all the wars in history, if you were playing Crusader Kings and you had to come up with a Cassius Belli to justify your invasion, Putin actually has a number of them. NATO is expanding when they told him they wouldn't expand. The Donbass region had declared its independence, and they had intelligence that may be false or may just be made up, claiming that Ukraine was going to go invade the two breakaway republics. The area had already been in a low-grade war for 8 years, since 2014. People have been dying, children have been getting killed. There's a whole mythos around it that we don't know because we're American. They call it the Madonna. The Madonna of Luhansk, where this poor woman and her child were both brutally killed by a Ukrainian artillery strike. So there's all of these different things in Odessa, that we don't hear about.
There was the trade union building in Odessa where they were fighting, and the Ukrainians burned 40 Russians alive inside the buildings. I mean, there were plenty of instances that anger the Russians.
Either way, yeah.
So if you think about, we go into Vietnam because of a police action. If Putin had called this a police action, it would have been almost funny just to spit in America's face.
Yeah, but that's the thing too, is that it's been about a month now since the invasion of Ukraine, and a little over a month now, as a matter of fact. And we already have people trying to say, there's clear information. We know exactly what's happening here. But the fog of war it's called the fog of war for a reason. It's a thing. There's stuff we're not going to really know the truth about until years after this is all gone. Exactly.
How do our leaders just go, that's the good guy? It's two languages that are very similar but different, and they seem to hate each other because they use different words. How do we know which is the good guy? It seems very obtuse. And so then, of course, if I remember reading about or learning about all this in 2014. I had a friend who was obsessed with it, and I kept telling him that I thought Putin. I didn't think that he watched that Netflix documentary that the CIA literally helped produce about the Ukraine revolution, and I kept saying, I feel like they're probably not being honest here. Turns out I was right. But for the average guy, it's like, how are you supposed to make a decision on this? Russia versus Ukraine. Most people didn't even know what Ukraine was until Trump got impeached for it.
They couldn't point it out on a map. Exactly. Yeah, it's a lot of things, and they are asking people to care when, as if it's not like less than a year ago, we just got out of the longest war in our history, which coincidentally also happened to be the biggest failure in American military history.
And Biden got up there and he's like, I was not going to keep this quagmire going. I'm going to be the president to get us out of this and stop starting wars. A few months later, we got another one.
I still remember that one of the funniest / most infuriating things was when Stephanopoulos was interviewing Biden, like, 2 days after Kabul was taken. And of course, the airport was the scene of the most chaos, and you had planes taking off with Afghanis clinging to the planes and eventually falling to their deaths. And Stephanopoulos asks him, and Biden is like, that was 4 days ago, 5 days ago. Why are you asking me about that? Like, oh, it was just again, that goes back to the lack of accountability. They aired that.
Like, you and I work in media, you know, and not for a live radio show, but if you're doing something that is produced, you end up with a lot of stuff that just hits the cutting room floor. That made it to air.
That really tells you a lot. Yeah, because that was the moment they stopped. For the most part, they stopped giving Biden a free pass and giving him, plot armor, as it were, to cover up his every single wrongdoing. But the point I was kind of going towards, we were talking about the purity test, and I think it's super important because the point I was making, this is what I remember. We were talking about how the left has basically gone all in on, like, yes, we got to support a war because Putin is evil, white nationalist, whatever. Putin is evil, rah, rah, rah. We got to support war. On the left, it's pretty uniform. On the right, it's a bit more split now. You have, of course, you have your neocons who are going to say, yes, let's go to war. Let's do it again. It's like Bush is back in office, baby. Let's go. Let's start playing Fortunate Son. And they're all gung-ho about it. But then, of course, you still have a sizable portion of the base and elected officials who are able to take a moment and say, didn't we just have a guy named Trump in office not too long ago who said, let's stop going to war? So I think it's good we have these divisions, and it's good that we are having these discussions on the right because it is more important now than ever before. This is a turning point to solidify, is the right going to continue in that America First direction that Trump started, or are we just going to revert right back to the Bush years as if nothing happened? And I don't think, as Jacob and I have debated about this, I don't think the America First option means let's just completely shut out everything going out in the world around us. We can still, like Trump, we can have smart diplomacy.
No, but I mean, the thing is, it never would have gotten this far if we had an America First policy.
Exactly.
Like,
if Trump was still in office, this wouldn't be happening.
Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't. Saudi Arabia wouldn't not be selling us oil. We wouldn't be calling up Maduro and Venezuela and begging for an ounce of the black stuff. I mean, Ukraine, Russia. So Trump has now told like 9 people, it's no longer a state secret, that he told Putin he would bomb Moscow if he went into Ukraine. We had. We had a crazy person. He told John Daly, the golfer.
Oh my God, that's amazing! What a Chad, dude.
Like he's on. So he calls. So he first relayed the story to the New York Post, and then John Daly calls him up the next day, and some other guy is recording John Daly calling Trump, and he puts Trump on speaker, and he goes, "Yeah, it seemed like Putin didn't do these things when you're in office." And Trump goes, "Let me tell you, I told him flat, and I liked him. He was a friend. But I told him if you hit Ukraine, we'll hit Moscow. All those beautiful towers are going down." And he didn't believe me. He kind of believed me. All you need is 2%. That's who we had.
Oh my! I like Ukraine. That the guy they elected there is an actor, former TV star, just like me. And I said, I'm gonna turn Moscow into a sheet of glass, and the first thing I'm gonna build from the ruins is a Trump Tower. That's the first thing that'll go up in New Moscow. But I believe it. Again, this is the guy who basically almost started war with North Korea, but then turned that around into peaceful negotiations by tweeting at Kim Jong-un at 2 a.m, "I have a bigger nuclear button and mine works." Like this. It works. His approach worked. Nixon called it the madman theory, and Trump perfected that. Remember that one interview when the tensions were highest with North Korea before they started meeting, Trump was asked, how do you feel about dealing with a madman in regards to Kim Jong-un? And Trump said, as far as dealing with a madman is concerned, that's his problem, not mine. Like, what a legend, man. But now we have...
So, yeah, we never would have got this far. Now, something horrifying about your point, I don't know what the numbers are. In the beginning, and now I think the polls are all lying. I think their first couple polls might have been honest. They said it was basically 85% of the country across the board, no matter what age group, political affiliation, how you voted in 2020, 85% of the country supports Ukraine. Not necessarily going to war, not a no-fly zone, but we support Ukraine. 85% of us, allegedly. I think, I still don't like war. I don't think it's right. I don't, human destruction and mayhem is always bad, but I would love to know if those numbers have moved. The more we learn about Zelensky, the more we learn about Ukraine, the more Biden blunders us closer to World War III. But the perception that we're being given is that 99% of the country supports Ukraine and maybe 85% wants to send troops. And obviously the left, which will never let a crisis go to waste, of course, I think their big plan here is to just use this as an opportunity to, and maybe it'll take 5 years, but eventually they're going to go around me and Jacob up and say that we express pro-Putin sympathies in 2020, and so off to Gulag.
Well, that is the ultimate goal, because I don't think that many people on the left actually want war, because they understand that this would be World War III. We would lose entire cities, millions of people, including them, because they live in the cities. Like it would be the liberals who would be the first to die.
And war is just unpopular in general, especially after Bush.
But I think that it's like you mentioned, Tom, that they see this as an opportunity to cast the right as traitorous in 2022 and 2024.
Pro-Putin, pro-Russia. Yeah, so they're doing it to Tucker already.
It's a domestic strategy.
It really is.
And of course, the Republicans are going in lockstep with this, because you get an hour a night on Fox News where Tucker is great. And then Hannity comes on and basically repeats Joe Biden talking points about Ukraine for the next hour. It's insanity.
And then brings Lindsey Graham on to talk about how Putin needs to literally be assassinated. And did you see that clip the other day? Lindsey Graham was speaking at Congress and said, if John McCain were here, he would agree with me. And we're like, yeah, that's why we're glad John McCain. That's why I don't like you. That's why we're glad he's not here anymore.
I bet he would. I bet that dynamic duo. I bet you think he's just heartbroken because nobody will call for war like him anymore. He's really the only one. That should be some comfort, I guess, to us. It would be Lindsey Graham and John McCain, and John McCain seemed to have more friends than Lindsey. Or maybe they've all just retired.
Well, Graham's unmarried and has no children. I guarantee you that there's a picture of John McCain on his nightstand when he goes to bed every night at this point. but I think it also goes back to something we talked about with the Joe Biden, the Hunter Biden stuff, is how much are people informed about this? And J.D. Vance said this very well. Again, I'm going to refer to him again. Another primary debate for the Ohio Senate race there. The American Conservative wrote a great piece about this. They formally endorsed him in that race. Of all the 5 major candidates on stage, 4 of them said they support a no-fly zone in Ukraine. And then they get to J.D. Vance, who's a Marine, a veteran himself. And he's the one on stage who says, no, I don't support a no-fly zone because we know what a no-fly zone means.
It was the same thing with Syria in 2015. You remember that? It was just Trump and maybe one other candidate, but I can't remember who said no-fly zone over Syria because that means World War III with Russia. Apparently, the definition has changed over the last few years, but I think you're right. I think Americans have forgotten. And I think we need people like J.D. Vance to remind them what that means.
Exactly. When you tell them that this no-fly zone literally means NATO aircraft, meaning American aircraft, would then have an obligation to shoot down any Russian aircraft in the air over Ukraine, which is a declaration of war, which means actual World War III, because then we're going to war with both Russia and Belarus, and then China probably uses that excuse to say, this is American aggression, we will side with Russia, and there you go.
Going to take Taiwan.
And they take Taiwan with North Korea's help, and again, India and Pakistan.
And so we have no oil, no food, no rare earth minerals, no computers,
no chips,
no international trade,
no Fisher-Price toys, no plastic, nothing, and all that. So if you just explain to people, this is what Vance said, if you explain what a no-fly zone is and tell them what it would mean, then a lot of Americans probably say, oh no, we don't support that because we don't want war with Russia.
It's bizarre. Imagine doing that in a referendum. Your first question is, do you want war with Russia? And like 89% of America votes no. But then your second is, do you want a no-fly zone over Ukraine? Like, that is just sleazy, man.
That is exactly what should be expected of the swamp, and especially, as Eisenhower warned in the intro we played, the military-industrial complex. The weight of this combination is now playing another role in taking away our liberties and affecting our democratic processes. It's happening again today, and we've got to do what we can to stop it. And again, we can support, I think the general stance of Americans is we should support the Ukrainian resistance and voice support for them against this unjust invasion, this violation of their borders. And yeah, maybe some of our European partners giving them weapons and, supplies and whatnot, but not a single pair of American boots should set foot on that ground. We should not declare war on Russia. There's a few
I don't
want to
give them supplies. We have bad track records with that.
It's just going to wind up in
allegations. And there's that too. But actually, that was what I'm starting to get the hots for Ilhan Omar. I'm actually saying her name right these days because she pointed out that what happens. I mean, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but it's looking like Ukraine lost the war about 2 weeks ago, and they're just not facing reality. Zelensky is getting more of his people killed for literally no reason when he has like a $30 million mansion in Florida. It's insanity. It's like Hitler in the bunker when Hitler could have left. Makes no sense.
Don't you mean, didn't he? I thought, Man in the High Castle said he did ultimately flee. He fled to South America or something like that.
Well, Zelensky would just be South Florida. It wouldn't be South America. It would just be South Florida.
But yeah, no.
I thought it was in the Nazi moon base. But
sorry,
but they bought. And so what happens when all of these laws, all of these surface-to-air missiles that can be operated by a resistance fighter in the bush, what happens when, I don't know, maybe ISIS gets that? What happens? It's already in Europe. What happens when they take it to Poland and then smuggle it into Germany and then smuggle it into France and then smuggle it into the United Kingdom and start blowing commuter or passenger aircraft out of the sky with NATO and American weapons? Like, that's the type of unintended consequences that could very realistically happen in the next 18 months because of what's happening right now.
Yeah, and that's why, especially being in Europe, instead, of course, Europe is always just a bunch of dominoes. That's how, both world wars happened, that just a couple minor skirmishes led to the entire continent getting involved. There's a lot of things at play here. There's a lot of factors. And again, I come at it from a stance, to clarify what I was saying before, I come at it from the stance that I don't support what Putin is doing. And I am seeing a lot of this on the dissident right. And I'm sure, Tom, you know what I'm talking about. I'm seeing Putin say, or people say, oh, Putin is based. He's justifying what he's doing because he's fighting globalists. And I'm like, I don't really know about that.
Yeah, I think that's overly, that's still putting our Western view on everything. I mean, Putin, so you can say that he's afraid of assassinations, which maybe makes us a little bit better. But to give you an idea of this guy, he spent the last 2 years living in a health bubble where nobody is allowed to get within like 12 feet of him, double the recommended distance, by the way. And that's how come those photos where it's the long table and his generals are all the way at the other end. That's his bubble. That's his health bubble. He's afraid of COVID. What a loser.
Oh yeah, they recently just came out of, I think it was lockdowns in Moscow just a couple of months ago. Like they took COVID probably as seriously as liberals in America did. They definitely went overboard on that. So real quick, Tom, what would you say is the and then Eric, what would y'all say is the optimal outcome of this war in Ukraine?
Tom, you want to go first?
Optimal for who is my only question.
For everyone. I would say first of all for America, but then for the Ukrainians,
most peaceful resolution.
I mean, the best case scenario for everybody, including Zelensky, I'm going to offer the best case scenario for him. The best case scenario is Putin does what he wanted to do literally the entire time. He's going to take the Luhansk region and he's going to take the Donbass region, or I'm sorry, the Donetsk region. I'm learning to pronounce all these words, aren't we all? And then he's probably going to go ahead and take the Mariupol area as well. That way he has a continuous land border going from Russia to the Crimea, which gets them a warm water port, and it will be a great boon to the Russian economy, even if all these sanctions stay. Zelensky is going to serve out the remainder of his term. Then he's going to move to America, where he has citizenship, and be a CNN analyst. That's my prediction for him. Putin is going to be fine. He's going to be like Xi and be president for life. The people of Ukraine are going to suffer the most in all of this, and literally nobody's going to care about 6 months after the violence ends because they're white. That's my prediction.
Eric, interesting. Yeah, I certainly some elements of what Tom said. I think, again, at the end of this, Putin, what he wanted from the beginning, what he said publicly right before the invasion, is he wanted those two eastern regions along with Crimea, which again has still been annexed. He was going to
and he actually said he was going to protect their independence. Now, I guarantee you that just like in whatever places, you're going to see a referendum where they would vote to join Russia.
Right. So maybe in that sense, not take it over and just make it an extension of Russia, but maybe establish a new country like East Ukraine or something. It could be like
it'll be like I mean, he did this in what's the place where the Muslims are over there that everybody
Chechens?
Chechnya, Chechnya. The Republic of Chechnya is still a republic within the Russian Federation, and that Ramzan Kadyrov guy, who makes the best propaganda of the war, by the way, highly recommend his Telegram channel just for kicks and giggles. He rules Georgia as an autocrat within the Russian Federation, and so you might get the same type of thing with Luhansk and Donetsk. It's kind of the situation in Crimea, where they did a referendum famously that, of course, there were were allegations that the referendum was totally fake, and it was like when Kim Jong-un gets 100% of the vote or whatever. But that was his way of going in there and saying that he took Crimea from Ukraine. So I think we'll probably see the same thing. And NATO, by the way, NATO is going to be with their tails between their legs. See, NATO just got all this money from when Trump was in office. So they don't know what, they just got more money they've ever had before. They don't know what to do with it. I guess World War III seems fun to them right now. They're going to blow all of the money Trump got them on this. They're going to admit that Ukraine will never join NATO. Ukraine will probably sign something with Russia saying that they will never try to join NATO, and they'll disarm their military, which are the second biggest military in Europe when all this started. So that'll be a big boon for Russia. And then the Russia might even like keep some peacekeeping troops there for the next 20 years, like we did in Iraq and Afghanistan.
Yeah, because I know Zelensky did say the other day that he was considering. He says like, oh, now we're no longer pursuing NATO membership. Like he seems to have already backed down of that. So I think some modifications to Tom's prediction that I would make for mine. Again, yeah, Putin secures the independence, what have you, or that language of those eastern provinces and Crimea. Zelensky confirms Ukraine is not going to join NATO. I think Zelensky could still very well stay in Ukraine. I think he could, at this point, if it ends with just those two eastern provinces and Crimea, and they keep the rest of the country, that would be seen as a win, considering how far they're advancing, and they're literally outside Kiev right now. That he would take that as a win, and he'd stay in Ukraine. He'd probably.
Oh, my thing is, he'll finish his term, and he'll do the maximum legal terms, but then he'll retire here.
I could see him. Yeah, I could see him totally getting reelected again. He got elected with like 75% of the vote last time, and now I argue he's more popular, as a war hero. They're Churchill, as it were. So I could see him getting reelected. But I think at the end of the day, whatever that optimal, if that is arguably the most optimal outcome, and of course the refugees all come back to Ukraine, they're able to return to their homes and not, scatter among all the other neighboring countries. But even if that's the most optimal, what we still have to consider, again, as I said earlier, is what China takes away from this. And China takes a look at the situation. Okay,
China wins?
Right. They definitely win, knowing how weak the United States is. That, of course, if we weren't going to do anything against Russia, we certainly are not going to do anything against China when they own our economy. But are they going to ultimately take that as the green light to make their move on Taiwan? Because Taiwan has more strategic significance, certainly to us and to the world, than Ukraine does.
I've been saying that this whole time. Yeah, I think China's going to wait like 3 months after this is all finished. Could be next year. Could take a while. But they're going to wait until it's no longer fresh in everybody's minds, and then they're just going to do it because they know nobody will stop them now. Right. But they can't do it right now because then everybody's going to go, but we're all pissed about Ukraine. How come we're not pissed about the Asian one? And there'll be accusations of racism and all that stuff. So they got to give it a few months. But otherwise, I agree with that. Well, Jacob, what's your prediction?
I'd like to see Hungary take back Transcarpathia. I'd like to see Romania take back the SHOWNOTES region. Actually, that could go to Moldova. The strip in western Ukraine, that could go back to Poland, like Lutsk and Lvov. And then Belarus could come down and take central Ukraine, and then everything Kiev and east could go over into the Russian Federation. That would be the optimal outcome, in my opinion.
Ouch. Wow. All right. Gee, we got our Putin shill over here, guys. Forget Tucker.
Divvying up Ukraine.
Oh, I'm shilling for Hungary and Romania equally. I mean, those poor Hungarians, they're not allowed to learn their language in school, so it's time for them to go back to Hungary.
I do remember seeing Time magazine. Of course, it was Time magazine had an article, like the headline saying, "The entire EU is united against Russia, with one exception." Bomb, bomb, bomb. And it's Ukraine. It's Hungary, because of course they hate Viktor Orban and they want to use that against him. But yeah, it's
what is with the Visegrad group, Visegrad? They're like so. You might as well just watch CNN. They're just putting out constant propaganda.
It's just such a mess. And again, I look at it thinking, like you said, Tom, I think certainly the attention span in America is going to fade away. It's already arguably fading away with, again, the woman who's not a biologist, in her Supreme Court confirmations. Everyone's already kind of focusing on that. And, the MSNBC circuit, like, oh, racism against a proud black woman, a yes, Queen Slay. Like, they're already shifting because, like you said, Ukraine is a white country. It's a mostly, I believe, Catholic country. Correct me if I'm wrong, but is, heavily religious country. It's European. They want to focus more on racism against black people. I remember there was this one headline from some outlet, I forget where, saying, the real struggle in Ukraine, the plight of black Ukrainians who want to be refugees, but they're not being allowed into Poland because they're black. I'm like, yeah, okay, whatever. But
I liked Michael Savage, who is just turning into a great troll in his semi-retirement. He just put out, "Why," in all caps, like he always does, "why are there no visible Africans in Ukraine?"
God. Yeah, it's just such a mess. And yeah, like you said, the attention spans are going to shift, and it's going to be something new. Like, this is not going to be what decides the midterm elections. I mean, I remember, Rush saying back in 2020 that, in August or September, the thing that is going to decide the 2020 election hasn't happened yet. And then, of course, Ruth Bader Ginsburg died in September 2020, and that played a huge role. So this is probably going to be as distant of a memory by November as the Afghanistan withdrawal.
I think that's right, and I hope you're right, because it depends on how fast the war concludes, I guess. Which if you've played video games and you look at these maps that they're coming out with, it's like Putin's doing a nice little cauldron pattern where he's got like 30,000 Ukrainian soldiers almost completely encircled, and in a video game they would all be dead already, because they're not real people in a video game, and you can just kill 30,000 people without anybody caring. But in real life, they seem to be slow walking it because they don't want to commit this atrocity. They want Zelensky to surrender like a man. But I don't know if he has that in him. I really hate Zelensky. I'm not anti-Ukraine. I'm anti-Zelensky. The guy's evil. Oh. But I think that...
Not sure if I agree with that, but I'm interested to hear your thoughts on that.
I think that this will not be the thing that decides the midterms, but it could be the thing that decides the general election, because the consequences of this are going to be so far-reaching and economic that, I mean, there's people who are way smarter than me predicting depressions by the time we have a presidential election.
Oh yeah, that absolutely is possible. And again, this is indicative of just how horrible Biden is at his job, and how far America has fallen in just 2 years, thanks to his leadership or lack thereof. And if any indication, if nothing else, yeah, this will be as distant of a memory by November as the Afghanistan withdrawal. But what next big crisis will happen between now and then? Because guaranteed, this won't be the last.
$10 gas, $8 loaves of bread. I don't know. What could the crisis possibly be?
I don't even own a car, and that made me physically cringe just thinking about that.
So in February, before the war, I was writing just some articles for Valiant News, so we would have a backlog when we launched, and so I didn't want them to. I wanted them to kind of be evergreen. And one of them that I wrote was an article that came out, I think, originally through the AP, and then it was quoted by some local news, but it was experts suggest and this is February 10th, by the way. Experts suggest moving closer to work to avoid coming $7 a gallon gas. And the experts actually warned on early February that it could get as high as $10. But I thought, I can't put that in the headline. People won't take it seriously.
They won't believe you. Is this the Babylon Bee? What is this? Yeah.
They're already talking about it. They were already talking about it a month ago before the war. We're going to see it. I mean, it's going to be scary, and I don't know how Biden survives it, in all honesty. We've seen the Federal Reserve increase rates for the first time in my life. It's horrifying.
Yeah, I've made the prediction before that I think what happens is Biden is going to stay in office until the midterms. The Democrats are going to get crushed in the midterms, I think, in the House, certainly, and certainly state legislatures across the country, maybe even lose the Senate. I don't know about that one. The map is not friendly to Republicans, but I think they do have losses in the midterms. They're going to blame it on Biden, and using his age and using his failures, they're going to force him out, either 25th Amendment or resign or something, and then we get...
He'll have a medical condition.
He'll be put out to pasture, metaphorically speaking, of course. But they'll say "Oh, thank you,
in Delaware.
Thank you for your service, Joe." And now it is time for
parties.
And now it is time for the age of white men ruling the country is over, because now we have.
But that's
I don't even
not
want to say
better.
her name. I don't want to say her name.
That's
even.
not better. That's not better though. She's an imbecile. She gets up there and that Mrs. Harris, Vice President Harris. What about the Ukrainian refugees?
Well, recently,
millions of people suffering.
Recently, it came out that she got peeved at Joe Biden because his staffers would not rise when she entered the room. She felt that was a sign of disrespect because she, as a woman of color, isn't being treated like a white vice president would, because she thinks that people rise and stand for white vice presidents, I guess.
And Jacob, the other thing about this that complicates things, Kamala and Joe freaking hate each other apparently, and so do their staffs.
Oh yeah. And Joe Biden hates her too. The first lady, the first doctor who is our first lady, she hates Kamala as well. It's a very dysfunctional. This could easily be the most dysfunctional president VP team since I think
God,
JFK.
Could you imagine if SNL was funny? You have Joe Biden, who is a senile old man. Then you have Kamala Harris, who just can't stop laughing at everything. And then who's number 3? Nancy Pelosi, the alcoholic.
Lord help us.
With her dentures falling out.
Lord help us.
This is like the perfect skit. Every single day you wake up and it's an SNL skit happening in the White House.
The Democratic Party leadership is literally an old folks home, and Kamala Harris is the aide. She's the nurse. Like
she's the caretaker.
Oh man. Yeah, well, that was definitely, this is why we need to have more guests on. This is why we are glad to have you back, Tom. This is why we look forward to maybe having more of your colleagues at Valiant News and elsewhere on our podcast. This was way too much fun. It went way too fast. But unfortunately, I think that is about all the time we have left for this episode. So, Tom, would you like to plug Valiant News? What are the outlets and various alternative social media platforms where we can follow your work?
We make it easy for you nowadays, believe it or not. You can go to valiantnews.com, valiantnews.com. And if you want to figure out where I am on Gab, Twitter, and all the other things that we have to keep up with, just go to tompappert.com and you can see the full list. I finally made it easy.
Tompappert.com. That is the best website name ever. That is the most base website name. I did not know that was. I just now learned that from you.
It's just literally all my social medias. I just bought the domain and I forwarded it to Linktree. That way, because it's like I have too many. It's at Real Tom Pappert. Got him for Trump. There's too many different websites. Just you can go there and see them all if you really want to listen to me yell more.
Awesome. So valiantnews.com and tompappert.com. Be sure to follow this wonderful madman that we have on our podcast here. We look forward to having him back in the near future. Thank you once again, Tom, as always. And thank you guys for watching. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and we look forward to more guest interviews. Be sure to follow all of our latest content at our website, righttakepodcast.com. The full list of websites and podcast platforms where we are available, righttakepodcast.com/subscribe. And as ever, if you are feeling so generous, righttakepodcast.com/support. We'll talk to you next week, guys.